Hey, welcome out, friends, to our discussion of week 2 of How to Be Rich. I'm Jeremy. I'm joined by the illustrious
Rocky Hernandez.
Rocky Hernandez.
So glad to be here with you guys. Glad that you guys are continuing to meet with your community groups. That is an incredible commitment, and it's going to change your life. What do you got for us, Jeremy?
Listen, this was a jam-packed message.
Oh, for sure.
I feel like toes were stepped on with this one. Mine still feel a touch broken. I mean,
Right.
this is a tough one. Anytime you talk about money, it just
It gets
seems
uncomfortable.
like it gets uncomfortable, right?
Especially at church.
Oh, especially
Right?
at church. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you guys brought your friends to church this morning and we're like, oh, we're talking about being rich, did you kind of panic a little bit?
Right.
Yeah.
So lean in with us on this one because it's a little awkward for everybody, right? It's tough.
We'll get through it together.
So listen, let's cover last week real quick.
Okay.
We set the stage, right? We established that every one of us is rich.
Yes.
Whether you like it or not, the time that we live in, we are kind of the 1% of the
Out
1%.
of 7 billion people on Earth.
Yes, in the history of humanity.
Right.
We find ourselves in such a fortunate, blessed time.
For sure.
Economically, financially, right?
Yeah.
That also brings about some difficulty, right?
Mm-hmm.
So none of us, I think, if you were to ask me or ask people within the room, hey, are you rich? Not a lot of us are very quick to be like, yeah,
Because we're comparing each other to each other.
Exactly.
We're comparing ourselves to other 1%ers. And so it doesn't feel, we
Right.
forget that 99% of the world doesn't even
Right.
understand.
Right.
Yeah.
And money in and of itself isn't a bad thing. But one key thing that we talked about this week is that once you start to lean on it for
Right.
identity, purpose, satisfaction, et cetera, that's when it becomes a real problem. So
Absolutely.
we've all, at some point, and I think if we're honest, we've all kind of bought into, no pun intended, the lie that
Sure.
if I just made X amount of dollars, if I just found myself in this tax bracket, if I just owned this, drove this, lived there, whatever, then I would be happy.
For sure.
We've all bought into that at one point or another, but isn't it so funny? Some of the things that we really long for are things that they will hurt us in the end. So I think this is just a great segue here, a great icebreaker. At some point, I'm sure in everybody's lives there in your community group gathered up right now, at some point you all have probably at one point or another thought about something that you had to have, right? Something you had to buy, a vacation you had to go on, and it turned out to just be a disaster in the end of some sort. Why don't you take some time as a group, just break the ice and talk about that thing that just seemed like you had to have it that just bit you bad in the end. And then secondly, we talked quite a bit about the thought that we all, despite some warnings within the scriptures, we all want to be rich. I think it was Notorious B.I.G., right? He said,
More money, more problems.
more problems, right? More
Yeah.
money, more problems. But even Jesus gives the warning.
Yeah.
He says how difficult it is for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. Why do you think it's that we all long for this richness, yet there's so many warnings attached to it? Why would we want that?
It's because none of us want to feel like we're dependent on something outside of ourselves for our own joy, our own happiness. We wish, like here's the lie, we wish that we could live in a world where all on our own we could be happy and full of joy.
Yeah.
But it doesn't exist.
Yeah. We all long to be that kind of self-sufficient, self-sustaining. You can chart your course, do whatever you want, and money seems to be like the outlet, the means for that sort of thing.
And it becomes so difficult because then we want this inanimate object to do the things that God himself promised that he would be the one to do.
Man, and that's tricky stuff to know where the line is with this sort of thing. So why don't you take some time as a group to talk a little bit about that fine line between having wealth and not relying on it for your satisfaction, your identity, et cetera, et cetera. Take some time to talk right now a little bit about that as a group. And then finally, Rocky, we kind of wrapped up the whole talk by talking a little bit about how easy it is to trust in the provision rather than the provider, right? So a little bit along the same lines, but why is it so easy that we can trust God with the forgiveness of our sins, with our eternal destiny, You know, if you ask somebody about that, they're like, yeah, I feel like Jesus paid for my sins. I feel like God has a place in store for me when I exit this earth, when I enter eternity. Why is it that we can trust God with that sort of thing? But when it comes to, hey, there's more month than there is money.
Right.
When the bills are coming in a little too hot and heavy, why is it that we tend to panic in those moments, but we can trust eternity to God? What's up with that?
I mean, I have an answer, but I don't think anybody's going to like it. But, you know, I think that it's kind of this idea of, again, dependence on other people, or dependence on God, or dependence on God's people. And it means that when I'm struggling, not just in financial ways, when I'm struggling, I should be talking to you about my struggle.
Yeah.
And if you're able to help me, like you can and should help me.
Yeah.
And I don't think I don't think like our pride allows us to do that. I think culturally we struggle with that just by virtue of the fact that, you know, we're fiercely independent as Americans, and even more so as Texan Americans.
Sure.
Yeah.
What does that practically look like? As you guys are there in your group, why don't you take some time now to talk about that and see what comes out of that conversation. We're glad that you guys joined us, and we hope that this was just the seedbed for some really great conversation and talks amongst your group. We hope to see you here next week. We love you. See you then.